Alrighty, we're on.
We're on.
So I'm here at Sydney West Martial Arts again today, and I'm with Bobby Sandhu.
Definitely, you're not lying. We are at Sydney West Martial Arts.
Yeah, I had
The first one of these I've done sitting, like cross-legged.
Really? So normally you'd be sitting on. Yeah, I guess when I go to venues to do it, it's just I just try and find the right place to do it.
Yes.
But we chose the other mats today, and why we don't have the logo behind us is because there's windows above it, and I didn't really think about that when I set up. And then I set up, and I was like, oh, the lighting's shit. So
yes.
we had to rotate 90 degrees.
Well, you know about this logo, right?
The Breathless Club?
The Breathless Club. Yeah.
You can't see it on camera, but yes, I know the neon sign.
Yeah.
I've never been in there.
Right. Well, I'm sponsored by them. I get free visits.
Free visits?
Well, discounted price, 50% off anyway.
And what happens when you go into such establishment called the Breathless Club?
It's good. It's very relaxing. It's good de-stressing. It's a bit like a flotation tank.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So for people that don't know you, you're a bit of a comic.
Yes.
And also a grappler.
Yes.
And you've done your own podcast before as well.
That's right.
I guess, how would you describe yourself? Like, what would you say you do at the present moment?
Yeah. My top priority is teaching, training, competing in Jiu Jitsu. So, knowledge and skill development within, no-gi, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that's kind of what captures a lot of my attention. And then I'm a paid regular at the Newcastle Comedy Club.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been very lucky to be involved with those guys. Obviously, up until quite recently, because now I'm preparing for a match with Brody Greco coming up in a little over a week. So I've kind of shifted my focus, come to Sydney West, which is an elite Jiu-Jitsu institution, to be able to really focus my attention. Otherwise, generally, I'm kind of doing a lot of travel. I live on the Central Coast, which is kind of dead center between Newcastle and Sydney.
Yep.
So I have access to two of these cities, Sydney with great Jiu-Jitsu, also some great Jiu-Jitsu in Newcastle, Ronin Jiu-Jitsu. I teach there also. Yep. And then I kind of juggle teaching commitments, my personal training and skill development, as well as, doing some stand-up comedy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so for your background-wise, you're Indian by background?
That's right. So my family is from the state of Punjab, and we're of the Sikh religion. Mm-hmm. And there's quite my pop was quite involved in the community. He was the temple president, largest Sikh temple in Glenwood, if you ever...
Oh, the big one in Blacktown?
Right.
Yep.
Yes. So he served as president and then chairman of the committee there for many years. And my dad kind of came here. He came here, I want to say 80s or something. He came here quite 80s, 90s, quite a long time ago, and he's pretty well established in Australia. And obviously, very different life, being born here as opposed to trying to immigrate here, especially if you're not kind of going through legal channels and then trying to build a life out of nothing and in a very like alien culture, alien language.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful to have him go through that and not have to do that myself.
Yeah.
Often I'm in a service station and I see a guy my age, looks a lot like me, and I'm usually talking to them in my language because I'm quite connected to the culture as well. And I'm like, that could easily be me, except I'm the first generation. He's the immigrant, So
yeah. Okay. So just before we sort of get into how you got into what you're doing now, as opposed to being that guy behind the counter at the petrol station, with the Sikh religion, normally they wear like the headpiece, right?
Yes.
So is there a particular reason why you don't wear the headpiece? I guess is that something that you've made a choice for yourself? Or?
Yeah. I did wear it for most of my life.
Yep.
I wore it every day at high school. I started doing jiu-jitsu, and it's difficult. Some people do manage it. A lot of the Indian wrestlers, they'll manage like very long hair. I found it quite difficult, especially, I'm a very lazy person in general. Like, I didn't train today because I didn't have shorts. Like, that's, my life is in quite a bit of disarray.
That's the most convenient excuse. You're wearing shorts right now.
Yeah, well, he won't. I have to have no pocket shorts and stuff.
Okay.
That's why I like Luke, because we're like polar opposites in a lot of regards. He's very orderly.
Yep.
And I'm like very chaotic and spontaneous and whatnot. So yeah, I found it difficult to manage, and also I'll be a bit careful how I say this. My views kind of changed a lot as I got older. I got exposed to different ideas.
Mm.
You know, I at one point had a pretty sort of fundamentalist view of religion and whatnot, and since then I've branched out a lot and been exposed to many different types of ideas. I spent many months living in Buddhist retreat centers and monasteries and doing a lot of like mindfulness meditation.
In Australia or?
Australia. So I stayed in IMC, the International Meditation Center in Morisset.
Okay.
As well as Thai Forest Monastery in the Darug National Park.
Yep.
And those were some pretty powerful experiences that really kind of shaped my understanding of myself, which I think in turn helps me understand other people, the way they act, kind of their motive. Just, you know, I'm quite fascinated by my mind and how and why I do the things that I do, why I'm drawn to the things that I am, and why I kind of, it's just very interesting to me how my mind works. And meditation is kind of a way to observe it and get to know it better.
Was there a catalyst for why you went to a retreat? Like normally, yeah, whether it's, you know, friends invited you or something like that, or
I had a knee operation that kind of went bad. I had a pretty severe staph infection, so I spent a long time in hospital.
Yep. Is that just from jiu-jitsu or?
The initial knee injury was from jiu-jitsu. I had bursitis.
Yep.
It was just really bad, so I was gonna actually have my bursa, I think, partly removed or something.
Yep.
And then it was like an arthroscopic surgery that just my knee became infected. So then I had to have a second surgery washout and spend a while in hospital. Then I got out and the infection must have come back. So then I spent even longer in hospital. And during that time, I was just kind of on a hospital bed. I had a lot of time for kind of reflection. I was kind of pulled away. When you're a lot of people will do this, they'll make themselves very busy with tasks. When your mind is kind of idle, if you're sitting there and doing nothing, that's when you kind of start to think a lot. And it's interesting. Even you know, Sam Harris, I'm a big Sam Harris fan. Harris will say, even murderers and rapists are terrified of solitary confinement. And even very tough people find it difficult to be with themselves and just do nothing.
Yep.
And I remember I had a day in hospital where, because I was just doing Netflix binges, occasionally I would like read and try to do productive things, write jokes, etc. I wasn't studying jiu-jitsu as much then, which is remarkable to me knowing what I know about jiu-jitsu now and how important studying jiu-jitsu is. But most of the time I would just spend a lot of time on Netflix, kind of just wasting time really. And there was a day when my phone, something was wrong with the charging port, it wouldn't charge.
Yeah.
And it was like panic. I started ringing, like, someone needs to fix
buy me
the
a charger
situation now. Like, try to buy me a phone. And I realized, like, man, I just can't be, you know.
By yourself.
Just can't be, period. Like, I just can't even, you know, you want to wait for a bus. It's very difficult. A lot of people find it difficult to just be at ease, doing nothing.
Yep.
And so even if you do a bit of psychedelics or something, you realize, like, just being able to be and be idle and not have your mind just lurch into some kind of fear of the future, some type of things that might go wrong, and which you see there's obviously utility in trying to prepare yourself for potential like hazards and stuff, but to just always be thinking of, you know, oh my God, this might happen, that might happen. You know, people like that who are just always very worried and very pessimistic about the future, or they're just always down about past mistakes, etc. Yeah. So
I call that the rule of thirds, right? Like if you think about past, present, and future, and apologies, you know, people have heard me talk about this concept many times, but it's very relevant. You know, like the person that spends all their time thinking in the future is generally very anxious or worried about a potential outcome.
Yes.
The person that, or you could be excited. You know, I shouldn't say that it's always a negative thing. Like sometimes you're excited for what's coming the next day.
That's right.
Right. And then the person that is always thinking about the past. Oh, if I didn't do this, if I didn't do that. Generally, it's always governed by regret.
Yes.
Right. So you think about the past. There's only very few times where we're just being nostalgic and thinking about the past in a happy sense.
A pleasant way, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the times, and those are fleeting moments. It's like you walk into somewhere, you smell something that takes you back, or the food or something, and you go, oh, that's amazing. But then in a moment, that happiness is sort of dissolved because now you're just thinking about the present.
Yes.
Right. So, you know, a lot of the times people live their lives and they're governed by, you know, what's coming in the future or what's happened in the past, that they don't just enjoy just being in that
Yeah.
present moment.
Yes. Yes.
And I want to ask you a little bit more about, the mindfulness stuff, because I often talk about this, is that when you're growing up, you've got your parents or siblings, if you've got siblings, and your friends, and so that you always have other people around.
Yes. Yes.
Right? So you always get used to the comfort of having other people around.
Yeah.
And it's only that time when you either move out and you're by yourself, and then in which case sometimes it goes the opposite way, where you move out and you actually move in with mates. So you still don't have time by yourself.
That's right.
Right? Or you move out and then you're just partying all the time.
Yes. Yes.
Right? That you don't actually just sit there and look in the mirror and realize, hey, you know what? I actually don't like who I am, or I'm not comfortable with who I am as a person.
Yes. Yes.
Right? Or you just fill that time in so you don't have to confront yourself.
Yeah.
And just be alone. And, I only reflected on that, for me it was a little bit different. I got an older brother, 7 years older than me. So he went overseas, part of his uni degree and things like that. And then my relationship with my dad was quite fractured when I was growing up over some things that he had done. And my mum had some mental health problems. So I actually got that just being at home.
Wow.
Because nobody was at home. It was literally just, if I was home, like my dad could be at home, but we didn't talk.
Yes.
Right, being two different parts of the house. So I was literally just alone.
Yes. Yes.
And when you realize that, hey, I'm spending all this time by myself. If I don't actually like myself, this is a pretty shit time.
Wow. It's interesting, like, if you look at like the setting of a Vipassana or a mindfulness retreat, I was describing it to a friend, and because you're spending 10 to 12 hours a day with your eyes closed, and you're not allowed to speak to anybody, and it's not just speak to anybody, but you're not allowed to communicate. So even looking at each other's faces and making gestures, I mean, unless it's absolutely necessary, it's discouraged.
So would the setting be like just like here, like we're sitting on the mats here?
No, so it's a Buddhist retreat center.
Yep.
You have where you're staying, like, segregated by sex. There's bathroom facilities, one large hall to eat. Very beautiful gardens, extremely well-maintained place. And then there's obviously a large hall where everybody sits and practices meditation. Very simple, following the breath or moving your attention throughout the body. Very simple, just kind of... and then there's obviously these people who take this very seriously, done this for many, many decades. Some of these people, they're mostly like Caucasian white people, but they've been to Burma in the 70s and 80s, years old, but they've been to Burma. They started going to Burma in the 50s and got very into this stuff. When I was describing my experience at the meditation center to a close friend of mine, I said it was like being with others, but being alone with others. And I was and it was actually a very profound and beautiful, like, and moving experience for me. But my friend said to me, Bobby, that's often how people characterize depression. So it's interesting how in one setting, with one set of framing and with one set of knowledge and skill, that can be, again, like we said, even it can be like solitary confinement in a prison. It can be horrific and be a really negative experience for people. But for a monk who just goes into a cave and is in darkness for 10, 20 years, it's exhilarating and it's beautiful. It's euphoric. So it's kind of just how you're able to manage your attention, really. It's like time. Like, people can do great things with time. They can do nothing with time.
Yeah.
So if you can learn how to manage your attention, like going back to time, you can waste a lot of time. You really can't waste attention. Give anything your full attention. And it becomes very important and profound and beautiful.
Yeah.
That's comedy, like part of comedy, because comedy's nothing really special. A guy's just talking.
Yep.
Like, anyone can just talk. But why can't anyone do comedy? Well, people aren't necessarily good at holding people's attention, keeping its attention. Because that's the thing, when the mind, I'll use some kind of jargon where we'll talk about objects of attention. So like your attention is like kind of like a spotlight of awareness. You can feel sensation in your left hand or listen to sounds and different sensory stimuli. And then obviously we all experience how we can focus that spotlight on different things.
Yep.
Why am I talking about that? If you find an object of awareness to be uninteresting, like, when you're in school, you don't want to listen to what the teacher's saying, you're going to zone out. And a lot of people are like, oh, ADHD, whatever, I'm not too educated on that stuff. But it's like, most people, if something's very uninteresting, unless they're very conscientious or whatever, they're going to just focus on something else, like talking to a friend or scribbling on whatever.
Yep.
So just learning how to kind of override that, you can find, like that's what happens with psychedelics. You look at a flower or something very ordinary, mundane, and it becomes incredible just because you have free attention and you can sustain attention on any given object. And that's what a lot of these kind of more preliminary and more basic meditation practices are. They're just exercises in concentration. And you can try this. If you get very good at even staring at like a dot on the wall, you can start to have like euphoric, psychedelic-like experiences. It just gets to a point where, you know, the feeling of your body and sounds, other things kind of fade away, and you just kind of hyper-focus on one thing. And in general, I think people say, you know, from an evolutionary point of view, that's not very useful. That's why I think it's a very uncommon skill for people to possess, because if I'm too busy focused on a dot, a tiger's going to come and eat me. So you got to be able to have this kind of, you know,
awareness,
like squirrel awareness, where you're like, da, 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 da. But obviously, I think you want to be able to do all things. You want to generally out and about. I don't think that's a very good way to practice mindfulness. I think in general being out and about, you can practice them more. Even I think the Tibetans, they just have an open awareness and they're aware of whatever they're aware of.
Yep.
Because you'll notice that even too with attention, if you're just sitting and you're just going to try to not be captivated by thought and not be, not start thinking and not knowing you're thinking and become distracted, you'll notice that you'll kind of, sounds will interject into experience. You might focus more on sights, sensations might become prevalent, and there's kind of like this ever shifting experience is constantly shifting and changing. It's amazing just to sit back and notice what it's like to be you. Like the fact that you're having an experience, and I always wonder, I'm like, we went from very base elements, carbon, oxygen, whatever, hydrogen, into these very sophisticated apes that, you know, stack up books and put mics on them and then talk to each other and record it. Like, it's incredible how that happened. Like, this is really, there's something Harris says too. He goes, despite what we might learn, and obviously we're continuing to learn more and more via science, this is really a miracle. The fact that it's anything that it's like to be you, the fact that it's anything to have an experience, it's pretty incredible. And we so often lose sight of just the awe and wonder of what it's like to be alive. Yeah, you sound like a bit of a weirdo talking about this stuff. People
no, but it's true. Like when to just be able to sit down, contemplate on things, right, and zoning. I think, you know, we all get carried away in this idea that, oh, I need to be doing this, I need to be doing that, and you chase these goals, but for what? Yes, right. And people would say, oh, you know, they might look at me and they go, oh, well, Johnny, but you achieved your goal, so I'm not there yet. Yes, right. Yes. So they're still chasing. People are still chasing, right? But then you know, I was even talking to Josh, you know, Saunders the other day, and it's like, you know, yes, he hasn't achieved his goal yet. He wants to win that 80cc gold. But then what? You know, like, you know, you got to think about, okay, so yes, you know, he's putting in the actions to make sure that it's going to be impossible for him to not achieve those goals, right? But he's also very smart in the sense that he's also putting in place actions that allow him to continue. There you go, Josh. That will allow him to continue, you know, doing something irrespective of what the goals are. Like the goals are just boxes that get ticked along the way. Yeah. Right. So, you know, I for me, it was very different in the sense that, and I've told this story before, but like, you know, I had some very objective career goals that I wanted to reach. And I thought, you know, I was going to achieve them in a specific time. And then through a little bit of luck, you know, opportunity meeting preparation, I got them earlier than what I anticipated. Wow. But then it was like, okay, now what? Right? Yeah. And once I got there, it's like, you know, the next day you realize that it doesn't change your life one bit. Yes, yes. You know, and there's a saying that I love that I stole from another podcast, and it was like, you know, these moments don't define you, they refine you, right? And so if you think about that from whether it's competing in combat sports, you know, that win or loss doesn't define you. Yes. It refines you. You get better as a result of having had that experience. Yeah. Right? And I thought, you know, achieving this goal was going to define me. Oh, now I'm this. Yeah. Right? But so what? Yeah, yeah. Right? You realize that you wake up and you go, okay, I won this, but, you know, once the moment passes, the moment has passed. Yes, yes. Right? So it's really important. And I'm not saying you shouldn't celebrate your wins or your losses. Absolutely. You know, enjoy those moments and really soak those in. Yeah. Because once they're gone, you know, you can't just live. Now you're just living in the past if you're just staying focused on that. Now you got to think about, okay, what's the next thing? Yeah. Or how do you get back on the bandwagon to then achieve, you know, whatever it is that you want to achieve? And I guess that then leads us into a very important question of, you know, why do we do all this?
Yeah.
Right? Because now you mentioned psychedelics. I don't know if you've done many psychedelics.
No, never.
No? Never?
What's that?
But like it's one of those things that, there's two ways that you can look at it. You can go, life is so beautiful. Or you can frame it in a slightly different perspective and go, life is meaningless.
Yeah.
Right? That, we can do all of these things, but what does it matter?
I agree with the latter. Like, in the sense that meaning is a concept that we put on the world. So this is I think one of the problems, according to some of the Buddhist studies I've studied, right? Like, this is a microphone, so I give it a label, and now a concept applies something that's constant, unchanging, and nothing is constant or unchanging.
No. So
I'm Bobby. Well, no, I'm not, because I'm constant. That implies I'm an entity that's not changing. I'm Bobbying. I'm a process.
Yeah.
And I'm so different than I was 6 months ago.
Yeah.
I'm certain to be so different in the next 6 months when I go to Texas and have all sorts of these inputs are going to affect me, change me. I'm going to encounter these ideas. And it's also going to be, I have no idea how I'm going to react to things. That's the thing. People are very like, oh, I'm doing this, And they're like about Saunders and his way of thinking, I really admire a lot of his qualities. I think there's two games to be played. There's the external game of outward betterment, right? I'm going to complete my tasks, move forward, achieve, and I think that stuff is obviously we everything that we have that's good is as a result of that outward process of betterment, etc. Just moving forward, trying to make things better, trying to make your life better. Bridging the gap between what you want to be and what you are. Right? Everyone has that gap. But the second game that you can play is you can realize that all that first game is finding a reason to be content and fulfilled in the moment. So, okay, I've completed my checklist for the day. Now I can be at ease. Now I deserve a rest. Now I can feel good because I've got my tasks completed. But you could have felt good the whole time as you were completing the tasks. You don't have to, like, if I got a parking ticket the other day at the front, right?
It's a very common occurrence. Yeah.
So I could have been, so the moment I saw there was a parking ticket, there's like a bit of a heightened sense of emotion, whatever sensation in the body. I'm like, I got a parking ticket. Now, I mean, that's a good thing, because if I didn't care at all, I would get parking tickets every day and I would be dead broke, right? So it's good that I have a negative emotional response. Now, the problem comes now is if I continue to feel bad and mull over it and, it's not helping me. Now, okay, I had the bad feeling. I should immediately go to action. Well, what can I do about this? I cannot park in the same spot. If I park there for an hour, I move the car, so on and so forth. I put it elsewhere, But the mental game is the moment I realize I'm feeling a negative experience. It's not good to be feeling this way, but I am the guy feeling this way. The parking ticket, the paper on the windshield isn't making me feel that way. I am selfing. I am thinking, this sucks, and where am I going to get this 120? I would have loved to keep that money. I could have done this with my money. By having those thoughts, which I'm having unconsciously, they're just kind of rolling out in response to some kind of visual stimulus.
Something that's happened. Yep.
Now and then there's emotions that come with it. I'm having this pause. Maybe I feel unhappy or disgruntled, and then that can lead on. And now the other thing is now I'm practicing being frustrated. So I'm getting very good at it. Some people practice a lot of frustration. They get very good at it. Or I can practice coming back to a more equanimous state. I could do some sort of a reframing. See, hey, look. There's the other game is to just, you can learn to just drop negative emotions. This is a skill that you can get better and better at, emotional intelligence, not being too bothered by things, understanding, okay, there's been a change in my emotional state. There's many changes in your emotional state during your day. And most people aren't very sensitive to these because they just kind of swept up into whatever thoughts or emotional changes occur.
Well, that's, I think that's conditioned into us from when we're kids.
Yes.
Because as a child, when your parents teach you things, they teach you, don't do this, it's bad.
Yeah.
Or do this and you might get a reward. So our conditioning from from being a child is that things are either good or bad.
Yes.
So then when we start to view things as we get older and we have to make decisions for ourselves and chase outcomes for ourselves, we always view things in terms of good and bad.
Yes.
Right? But the point about good and bad doesn't really help us, because good and bad are actually outcomes, right? You got a parking ticket. That's a bad outcome, right? Whereas, you know, one of the books that I really like was the Four Agreements. I don't know if you've read that, but one of the things in that is that, you know, you want to remove yourself from like the idea that of good and bad, right? There is no good and bad. There's only actions and consequences.
Yep.
Right? If I don't move my car after an hour, I'm going to get a parking ticket.
Yes.
Right? You can say, yes, a parking ticket's bad, and then you can go use that as part of the feedback loop.
Yeah.
But that doesn't help me because it's already happened.
Yes.
Right? So if I just go, okay, what are the consequences that I want to have,
Mm.
and what are the consequences that I don't?
Yes.
If my actions align with the consequences that I want, okay, I don't want to get a parking ticket, well, I'll move my car after an hour. Right? If I want to get a pay rise, I'm going to ask my boss. I'm going to work harder.
Yeah.
If I don't want to get fired, I won't turn up late. Like, there's all these sorts of things that come into that. So, you know, it's really difficult for a lot of people when you spent your first 18 years of life having your parents condition you that, hey, your report card wasn't very good. That's bad.
Yes.
You know, or you got a parking fine, you got a speeding fine, you got a first job. That's great, right? Your boss is an asshole. That's bad, right? You know, all of these things that we go through, we might lose some friends, we might get bullied, we might have all of these things, and we go, oh, okay, well, they're either good or bad.
Yeah.
When we need to think about it more in terms of action and consequence. Now, there might be situations where you've done absolutely nothing and something bad can happen.
For sure.
Right? But that's still, you know...
That's most of life, I think.
Yeah, sometimes it's the hand that you dealt.
Yeah.
Right? Some people are dealt very bad hands. And,
no doubt.
You know, it's interesting when you start talking about suffering, right? And you go, you know, there's a lot of people suffering in the world, right? And I'm thinking about that from like, you know, people that you know, let's say people who are going through famine and starving, right?
Yeah.
Or whether it's, you know, they're born in the wrong place, right? And they're forced into certain types of labor.
That's right.
Right? Like there's all this sort of suffering in the world. I think, you know, from that perspective, the take that I sort of view it as is that, well, first of all, I need to be grateful that I'm not in that position.
Yes.
Right? And so, you know, you mentioned it, you know, like your parents migrated here, my parents migrated here. You know, I'm very fortunate that my parents came to a place like Australia, right? And that through their hard work, and so, you know, when I would tell my kids about, you know, what my life was like growing up, like it was difficult because from that perspective, you know, my parents would get home, we'd get home very late. So every day, you know, first of all, they sent me to a school that was an hour away because it was closer to their office. And the idea was that we're going to move to this other area eventually.
Right.
So, you know, for my primary school years up until year 4, I was traveling like an hour each way.
Damn.
And then not only were we traveling an hour each way, in the afternoon when they picked me up from school, we'd go back to the office. And so I'd be at the office until they finished work because they both had their own businesses, right? So by the time we went home to have dinner, it was like 8, 9 o'clock at night.
Yes.
Right? And so it's like, you know, when you think about it from me perspective, like it's like you're eating very late. It's probably not the healthiest or the best way to do things. But, you know, as a result of that, you know, with me and my family, we eat dinner quite early.
Yeah.
You know, we're eating like 5:30, 6 o'clock, you know, not later than 7. Right. And I try and get the kids in bed by, you know, 7, 8 o'clock. And so I have like a different approach to it just because I know what it was like for me growing up. And so I've sort of given them the opposite.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm only fortunate enough to do that because I had these parents that worked so hard to give me these opportunities.
Right.
Right. So first of all, I know that I've been given a better platform to stand on. You know, it's like that Albert Einstein quote of standing on giant shoulders. Right. You know, off the back of our parents' hard work, we have this opportunity to do something different.
That's my whole life.
Yep.
For sure. Yeah, suffering. That's it's also you know, people say like first world problems.
Yep.
Obviously, it's much worse to be, you know, mining cobalt in the fucking Congo as opposed to like you know, like my problem of getting a parking ticket.
Yeah.
But even if things are really well, suffering is inescapable. Like the Buddha says really interesting things. He goes, you're born, you're crying. Your life begins with crying. And then your mother suffered so hard to bring you into the world. And then growing up is suffering. Teenage, you know, all the adolescent years are very difficult. Being adult is even harder, I'm finding out, you know. And then, you know, even if you get through all that, there's old age, death, sickness awaiting you.
Mm.
So suffering is totally inescapable. Even you could be freaking Muhammad bin Salman. You could be a freaking sheikh, the autocrat, and still, freaking reporters, they don't want to let you behead people and shit like that. There's always some kind of an issue. So it's like that's the traditional kind of entry point for beginning a practice like meditation. So it's like, okay, that is my predicament, right? It's like your predicament of doing jiu-jitsu and you're continually finding yourself dealing with bigger, stronger opponents. So what do I do? Okay, you design a strategy and then a set of techniques to build a skill. So a strategy could be get behind my opponent, and then I could use techniques like body triangles and rear naked chokes to then deal with the problem. And I think that the strategy in meditation is to bring greater degree of awareness to your life, so as when suffering inevitably arises, you can use techniques of either diverting your attention or giving it greater attention, seeing it for what it really is. That's like Vipassana, what we basically get mindfulness from. What it really means is clear seeing, because the idea is like you don't understand the problem. And if you don't understand the problem, you can't really set about solving it. And often we think the problem is external. It's not us. It's so-and-so's fault. Or, it's for this reason. Oh, I can't do anything about it, or whatever. Or it's the parking ticket. Well, it's not the parking ticket. It's your response and your relationship to those things. So a lot of the change is an inner change of not just how you conceptually see things, but how you can direct your attention.
Well, I think there's an element there that sometimes, you can't see the reasons why things happen until you have the benefit of hindsight. And I'll give you an example.
Absolutely.
Use the parking ticket example. I'll use the speeding ticket example, right? So you get a speeding ticket and you go, fuck, got a speeding ticket. You know, what a dumbass, blah, 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 blah. But on the flip side, yes, I've lost some demerit points and I've gotten this fine. If I really think about what the negative consequences could have been, let's just say, okay, I was speeding. Let's say I ran a red light. I had a car accident. Somebody's dead.
Yeah.
Right? Things could have been so much worse than just getting that speeding fine.
For sure.
Right? And perhaps, that's the whether it's God or the universe's way of telling you, hey, slow the fuck down.
Yeah.
Right? I'm you mentioned the Buddhism thing. So I guess, from that perspective, do you believe that there is a God or a creator, or like what's your sort of belief in that regard?
I'm big on like what can we really substantiate, and then I try to avoid speculation. So if I'm not sure of things, I'm content with like, okay, I don't know, and that's an answer. All I can number one, something we are sure about, and this is big about Sam's way of thinking, is like the number one fact that we can all be sure about. This could all be a simulation. Everything is up for. We've been, as human beings, we've been so wrong
about so many things.
About things that are so fundamental.
Yeah.
Right? We thought stars were fucking, God had fucking pricked a pin into the night curtain, and we were enslaving each other and doing genocide. Like, we have been absolutely wrong about absolutely everything. But the one thing we can be certain about is that the lights are on. I am having an experience. That it's something that it's like to be me. So I am having a conscious experience as opposed to this mic, which is probably nothing that it's like to be this mic. And a dog, there's probably something that it's like to be a dog, because obviously a dog has sense organs, and you assume it's having an inner experience. So I'm having an inner experience, and there's kind of two kind of modes. There's an external world of sense perceptions of, my five senses, right? I'm sure of those. So I smell, hear, touch, see thing. And then there's my sixth sense, which is my mind. Now, my thoughts aren't tangible and real to you, but they're very real to me. I'm having these thoughts. I can think of numbers and words and sometimes even images and videos, and I have dreams. So there's like this difference between physical and mental phenomena. Other than that, I'm not too really sure of anything. Now, could consciousness in some way, this entirety of mental and physical phenomena, could that be seen as God? Some people, they phrase that as God. You know, some people have very Peterson, a lot of these great thinkers, they have these kind of very elaborate concepts about God. Do I think God is this entity that cares about you jerking off? Really?
Yeah.
That's his concern?
Yeah.
Like he's tasked with justice in the world, right?
Yeah.
He's a just and perfect, omniscient, omnipotent being,
And all I care about
right?
is Bobby Sandhu whacking it.
And he's like, "Fuck, man. You know what? I'll let a genocide happen today. I'll have the all the bullshit in the Congo,
But I'll make you blind, Bobby Sandhu.
but don't you dare touch your nuts." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He didn't even leave like a little opening, like, you know, maybe you could
Well, see,
just play with your nuts and
this
not
is- yeah.
Okay, I won't get to.
it's interesting because, you know, so I often talk about I had an experience on mescaline, right? And so mescaline is from a cactus, the mescal. I guess mescal, if you think about it, mescal is cactus in one of those languages, and mescaline is derived from a cactus.
Peyote,
It's kind of like peyote, yeah.
okay. Not that I know.
Oh, I thought you're being open and transparent.
No,
Bobby Sandhu.
of course. Yeah.
And that sort of, like, you know, when I did it, I always say that I didn't go in as a tourist. Like, I didn't go just to try and get high or whatever. I had spiritual questions.
Wow.
Right? And so my wife is a devout Catholic.
Okay.
And so, you know, when I told her, you know, okay, one of my mates got me this and this is what I'm going to try. And then she said, when you meet God, can you tell him I said hi? And that was obviously one of my questions. And I want to know if there's a God. And,
Okay.
you know, and of course, this is just my experience, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure if other people took mescaline, perhaps they had the same experience, perhaps they didn't.
Yeah.
Right? I know that one of the weird things about psychedelic experiences is that sometimes there is commonality of experience. Like there's commonality in what people see or might experience or feel or whatever.
Yep.
But I guess, you know, one of the things that it allowed me to sort of understand was if you're this egoless being, which is what you would sort of project as God, you know, there's two ways to think about it. Yeah, life can be very meaningless because if you're God and you live forever, and, you know, we're in the year 2023, so to speak, but when you go back in the history of humankind, how many people have there been, right? And reality is, you know, Bobby Sandhu doesn't do anything, does something that I apparently don't like.
Yep.
Well, in 100 years, Bobby Sandhu's gone anyway.
That's right.
Right? So, you know, all God has to do is wait, you know, 100 years, and 100 years and compared to infinity is nothing. It's a drop in the ocean.
Yeah.
Wait 1,000 years. Wait 10,000 years.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't mean anything. So whether you live or die, or you have a fantastic life, or a poor life, or no life, or whatever, to a God, a being without any ego, it wouldn't matter to me one bit. But the part that clicked for me was that what God's love is that it doesn't mean anything to me as God, whether you live or die, or you're happy or you're sad. But the fact that it could mean something to you,
right,
that you can live and have this amazing life or have this amazing journey, it means the world to you.
Right.
That Bobby Sandhu can have this journey and experience these things. Whereas, you know, to God, yeah, like I can just wait a bit, and if Bobby Sandhu's unhappy with me, so be it. But, you know, in 100 years' time, he's going to be dead anyway. Right? And so that was the part that for me really sort of clicked for me. And that was like, okay, you know, from that perspective. So personally, I think there is a God or a creator, whatever you want to call him.
Yeah.
Right? Because I always think back, you know, to even if you were to take the scientific perspective of the Big Bang, right?
Yeah.
If you imagine the Big Bang is like, you know, a flat lake.
Yeah.
Except there's no sides, right?
Okay.
And to start this Big Bang, you need to have something touch the middle of the lake. Whether it's a finger or a rock, something's got to drop to create the ripples that then, you know, cause all these planets to start expanding and going out, right? Because without that initial something, that initial spark,
well then
you have nothing.
Well, what? So how was he able to create the initial spark? What was his genesis?
That's a great question.
So then it's like, I mean,
so if you think about the concept of infinity, this is where you start to it gets very weird, right? Because then you go, okay, in another parallel universe, there's probably another Bobby Sandhu and Johnny App having exactly the same conversation.
Yeah.
Right?
I think a lot of my opinions I just parrot Harris because I think a lot of his takes on this kind of stuff, like a secular kind of secular form of spirituality. I like his views, and his whole take on meaninglessness is just this kind of sense of nihilism or discontent arises when there's like you're dissatisfied in some way, or you're not just completely at ease or just present. You're not just okay with the present moment. Like in that moment, there's no like questions about meaning or whatever. Because even without us, like let's say there were no human beings, there was just this process going on. I don't know. I'm kind of getting lost with what I'm saying here, but he's just saying that if you're completely at ease in the present moment and your attention is just, it's just sitting with the present moment and you're okay with everything as it is, there's total acceptance, then there's no question of meaning and meaninglessness. Because you're just playing with concepts, it's like...
Interesting. See, I sort of, I take this sort of view that, let's say for argument's sake, right, that there is a God, okay? And so I can go about and live my life like, there isn't.
Yep.
And do whatever the hell I want, and so be it, within the laws of society, so to speak, or societal culture and norms and things like that. And I could probably live a pretty happy life, right? I can go and get a great job and earn lots of money and really chase material possessions and do all this sort of stuff. And, at the end of the day, I'm going to be just like everybody else. I'm going to die. I'm going to fade away. When you think about legacy, like legacy is a flawed concept because you're dead anyway. So what do you care?
I agree.
Right? And when you think back in history, who do you actually remember from history? Generally you're remembering people that are bad. Yeah. You're remembering Hitler and Genghis Khan and, all of these conquerors. As opposed to, people that may have done, can contributed great things to human civilization and society. So, yes, I could live that way. And when I die, look, it's all gone anyway. But let's say, for instance, if there is a God, right? What do I want that relationship for me to look like, right? And for some people that means, perhaps they want to pursue organized religion and things like that. That's completely, it's up to you it's your relationship at the end of the day. It doesn't bother me what you want to do, right? But for me, it's like, okay, after I had this sort of epiphany about, that's, to me, like, that's what, it was almost like, to me, it felt like a cheat code, like you're playing Xbox and you get taken to the end stage of the game.
Wow.
I lived and died, 10,000 lives, and that was the sort of distilled version that I got out of this experience, right? And as a result of that, I was like, I don't want to take mescaline again. Like, I don't need to.
Yep.
And I felt like, I don't actually wish this experience on anyone. It wasn't, it's kind of like I wouldn't say it wasn't pleasant. It was pleasant, but it was like, I feel like you could get there with there's many other pathways to get to that point.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
But as a result of that, it's like, once you've done it, you can't go back. That's the way I sort of felt about it.
Yep.
Right? And so, so what does that mean for me? Well, it means that, okay, for me, if I believe that there's a God, I need to have some sort of relationship there. What does that mean? So, there was one of the weird things about mescaline is that, so I took it at night. And so when you wake up the next morning, you're still there. Like
wow.
It's like you're in two worlds. And so like...
Did you sleep at night?
Yeah, I slept. So basically, when I took it, it was like, say, 8 or 9 after the kids went to sleep.
Okay.
I went and lay in the study and I listened to like a little bit of peyote music. And then to describe, and I've described this many times on the podcast, but it was like that same imagery of the lake, and then it was like still, and then suddenly, a finger or something just touches the middle of the lake, and that's what starts. And then you start, I was spasming. So one of the things that mescaline does, it's like a paralytic. So I looked it up the next day to understand, try and understand from the physical sense what had happened. But yeah, so like imagine you're like twitching, like you got Tourette's, right? And what would happen is that twitching was like a heartbeat. So that initial spark, boom, boom, and then you twitch, boom, 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 and it'll get faster and faster and faster and faster. And you're living a life, like you're getting married, you're having kids, you're doing all these things, you're living this life, and then you die, and then it's flat again, and there's nothingness, and then it's like a momentary pause, and boom, 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 and you're living another life, and that happened like 10,000 times. I felt like I lived and died 10,000 times, and then like there was this sort of part of the imagery that I got was like after living all these lives. You imagine like fireworks, right? So so it was like a tapestry, like this, almost like like the David Jones logo, like how it's like that herringbone sort of black and white or silver and black sort of logo. And it was like this immense tapestry as you sort of zoom out. And what that tapestry was representing in my mind was they were all these people's lives.
Huh.
This wall of just lives, infinite amount of lives. And you could touch on one. And it would just, whether it was black or whether it was silver, it didn't matter what the color was. You just touch on one and that was somebody just living and dying in an instant.
Wow.
And like, it was like, okay, so you touch the next one. You live another life. Gone in an instant.
Damn.
And you just see like, and it was like you start zooming out and you realize, okay, shit, there's a lot of lives here.
You gotta hook me up with your dealer.
It's like an infinite amount of lives, right?
Yeah.
And so suddenly it's like you realize that, hey, at the end of the day, whether you live a life that's amazing or not,
yep,
you rejoin God at the end of it. You're just another speck on this infinite tapestry. And so that was one of the things that I got out of. And I wrote like a whole list of notes, but when I woke up and I had this epiphany. But one of the interesting things about the next day was like, you're almost in like two realms. I'm here in the physical, and I'd be doing physical things like making food for my kids and all that sort of stuff. And, but I'd also be in this alternate reality and see things from an alternative perspective. So like I think one of the things that happened the next day was my kids wanted to eat pistachio nuts. And they're like, like, being annoying about it. And I was like there, like in the physical, and I'm like, okay, yeah, here's a nut. But then in this alternative world, it was like, this is how God feels. Like when people are like asking them for something, because, when do people pray? You generally only pray when something's gone wrong in your life. That you're praying for some protection or some help, or, I pray for this person because they're going through something really, really difficult.
It's very interesting.
Right? And it was like, like I could give them a nut if I so choose to.
Yeah. I
don't have to. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter to me. Like, you can complain about not having a nut your whole life.
I complain about not having a nut often.
Right? You complain. Yeah. So like it was like that, right? So that was one of the things that made me think more about, okay, what is this relationship that I would want to have if there is this God that exists, right? So what that meant for me was like, I don't want to just talk to you when I need something. That means that I actually need to have a dialogue to say, I need to be grateful for the things that I do have.
Yeah.
So that in the off chance that there is a time that I might need something, well, if you have it's like your relationship with your dad. If you don't talk to your dad, and then one day you go, hey, Dad, I want this. Yeah. And he goes, mate, you don't even talk to me. Like, why would I give you anything?
I know. It's a very familiar conversation. I have it when the rent's due every month.
Yeah. So, right? So there you go. So, but like that was what it was like for me, right? And then like another one was like and this is an awkward one, but all parents would know this. Like one of my kids shat in their diaper.
Oh no!
Right, and so then you're washing them, right? And but this was like the messiest shit ever. Like when I say the messiest shit ever, it was like because they were sitting down and eating at the same time. It was like when they shat, it just went up their back.
I hope
it was one of those ones.
To this, they're eating or something.
Yeah, and like really visualize just how filthy and how smelly this shit was.
How old is your child?
I got 3, but at the time, so this was a couple of years ago, so would have been like maybe 1 at that stage, right?
I couldn't deal with that.
And so like I'd put them in the bathtub or something like that, and I was cleaning them up, and like for me, because I was I was more Buddhist growing up because my family's more Buddhist.
Theravadan or.
I don't even.
Which country they're from?
Singapore, so Chinese Buddhist, I guess.
Okay, more probably Pure Land.
Yeah. And so when I was cleaning up this shit, like it was like there's the physical aspect of dealing with this something that's dirty, right?
Yep.
And like one of the things that I always had a negative connotation about this word is the word sin, right? Because I think when Christians use this word, it comes off really condescending and judgmental. Yeah. Right, that you're, and they'll always say we're all sinners, and by nature of saying we're all sinners, like they're actually referring to themselves as well, right? But for some reason, I always took offense to this word, thinking that it was like, it sounds so judgmental. You're just a, Bible bashing prick, so to speak.
Yep.
Right. And when I was cleaning up my child, I was like cleaning the shit, and like I had this alternative perspective. So again, I'm here in the physical, but I'm still stuck in this other world as well, and it was like, well. Yes, like for us humans, when we're cleaning up shit, we go, oh, this is disgusting. But if you take the ego out of it, it's like, okay, it's a natural consequence of life. You eat, your body digests the food, and you shit.
Yeah, yeah.
right? And so but the parallel was that when you consume life, the natural byproduct is sin. It's not dirty. It's not, or it could be, but it doesn't have to be dirty. Like we apply all these negative connotations to the word.
Yeah, yeah.
But by nature of us existing, by nature of us living and consuming life, we whatever we do, there is bound to be some form of a sin. Whether it's you can say it's you actually act on it and you do something sinful, or you have a sinful thought. Now I have millions of those, right? Like everybody has millions
Not
of
me.
those. Oh, not you. The difference is that I go into this idea of that, the concept of infinity. Well, there's probably a Johnny out there that has acted on every single one of those sinful thoughts.
Jesus.
Right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be this guy.
Probably in jail.
It doesn't have to be the guy that's here, talking to Bobby Sandhu today.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like how it all sort of linked for me.
Wow.
So from your perspective, have you, dabbled in any psychedelics? Did you get any profound experiences? Was there anything that sort of
I think
you gleaned from that, or is it more just from contemplation and meditation?
I think meditation is much safer alternative for most people. I think for a lot of people, especially if there's a bit of history of mental illness in your family or something, it can be dangerous, and people report, having difficulty getting back to how they were. So as to speak, sometimes you have a really crazy experience. All you want to do is just reset.
Yeah.
Factory settings kind of thing. For me, I think meditation is closer to what I'm aiming for. Like I'm aiming for, something that's accessible all the time. So some kind of mode of being or awareness that's, available consistently, and you can drive a car on, which so if it was like about having some very profound experience, then I think it's you might kind of fall into a mindset of thinking that whatever there or the end goal of spiritual practices is like having some kind of like really blissful, very altered drug-like experience. I think it's more about just having just being free of kind of the more, or mostly free of the more classically negative states of being, anger, jealousy, hatred, greed, and just being more, having kind of more pleasant emotions of, just being generous and happy and pleasant and kind. That's more kind of what I strive to have. And yeah.
It's interesting. There's I think it was one of those Dalai Lama sayings about, people asking, I want to find happiness, right? So the first step is to take away the self, if you take away the I, because it's I want to find happiness, right? So you need to remove yourself from the equation first of all.
Yes.
Then the second thing you need to remove is the desire, right? Because by wanting something, by nature of wanting something, you desire it.
Yeah.
But if you remove yourself and you remove the desire,
yeah,
all you're left with is the word happiness.
Well, that's it, right? Like step one, I think, is the first and final step of like, what am I? What are you? What's going on? Like you're just having all these thoughts all the time. And basically the quality of your mind, your quality of your thoughts is the quality of your life and that of the people around you. If you're miserable and you're always having miserable thoughts and you're going to be saying miserable things, you're going to make the people around you miserable. So it's like you've basically got this voice in your head that's ongoing. Your ability to really focus on things is compromised. You're kind of like a plastic bag in the wind. You're carried around by whatever desire, this, that. And unless you can really kind of be aware of what's going on, it's hard. Some people don't even realize. They're just on this crazy momentum. It's years long. And then obviously if you get a lot older and you haven't kind of reflected on the kind of person you want to be and kind of life you want to have, it kind of gets pretty quickly to a point where it's almost too late, And I hope there's always like a turning back for people where they really want to better themselves they can. But sometimes people get to like, whatever, their 50s and stuff. And now they're just this person of, people have these real strong concepts of I and their roles. That's the other thing. Our like who we are in different environments. Like when I'm teaching a class, I'm a very different person than when I'm just taking a class.
Mm.
Then where am I teaching a class? What's the relative skill of other people in the room compared to me? One of the hardest things I've experienced is trying to teach when Craig's there.
Mm. Why is that?
I kind of feel like I shouldn't be teaching.
Because there's somebody more qualified, so to speak.
Yeah, like it's very odd for me. It's pretty funny. There's a video on my Instagram where I was teaching a seminar and he didn't tell me. He just kind of rocked up.
Yeah.
And I'm like kind of at the end of the seminar, and I was like choking
Starting
up a
to
little
choke.
bit.
Yeah.
And that's another interesting thing of like, right now I'm pretty comfortable talking to you, pretty comfortable in general. And then all of a sudden, if Joe Rogan walked in to Sydney West,
Yeah.
I would kind of become a very different person. I would feel very different. I would act and say things that are very different. So it's interesting how the community and environments in which you're in, they shape who you are so much.
That's interesting because I have a little bit of a counter view to that.
Go for it.
Yeah.
This will be fun.
And the reason why I say that is, like it's very common for people to look at somebody else and be in this shock and awe. And I've there's definitely been a time in my life where that happened. Like when my wife and I, we were on honeymoon in Croatia, and Game of Thrones was filming in Dubrovnik at the time, and it was all set up and everything. And so my wife and I, we'd been walking around the back streets trying to catch, a picture of someone or find someone. And we're like walking down this alleyway, and my wife was like looking at her phone, just trying to work out, where should we go next or whatever. And Lena Headey, who plays Cersei, was in her full get up.
Fuck that bitch.
She's walking up the stairs.
Yeah.
And
you
like
say shame. Shame. Take off your clothes, bitch.
That was the season that they were doing that, but it wasn't.
Was she
wasn't
naked?
just no. She wasn't. She was in like the proper, like the full dress and everything. And like at the time, like I because I didn't expect it. It caught me by surprise. And like I sort of looked at her and I was like, it's like that.
Wow, yeah.
In like normally I never freeze.
Yeah,
Like there's been other times where it's like I've been in the lift with Mark Webber at the F1 and things like that, and my wife was like, "Oh, it's Mark Webber," and I was like, "Oh, hey mate, good luck." Like it doesn't bother me. I meet people and like I don't really, I just take this view that we're all human.
Oh, I agree with you.
Right, so I don't let like they're probably so used to people being so awkward around them that they'd be normal either way.
Yeah,
but for me, it's like I'm sort of. I don't want to add to any sort of awkwardness. I just try and
see. I don't want to be awkward.
Yeah, but you just get this feeling like
it's also like my parents don't give a fuck about Craig. They're like, who the fuck is this guy?
Yeah, so we're referring to Craig Jones here, right?
Yeah, and I just care because I'm basically an Australian jiu-jitsu guy. So it's just all. That's the thing. It's all fake and just like some people care so much about like fucking music or whatever their little niche is. This is like our little niche. And we're all fucking crazy about like who can fucking roll around on the floor the best. And most people think we're fucking idiots. That goes back to community environments. If you're in the wrong community, let's say I value jiu-jitsu heaps. If I go to a boxing gym, I have zero value. So just by changing my community environment, I have zero value. But if I go to some jiu-jitsu schools, they'll fucking give me a bunch of money and fucking treat me really well and take me out to eat and stuff. Why? Because I've changed the community. To this tribe, I bring a lot of value. So then there's that value exchange. Craig, for me, is this very high value person. But for someone who doesn't give a shit about jiu-jitsu, to some farmer in India, he's like, oh, can he till the land? Or you can't even till the land? What value does this guy have? Can you grow rice?
Yeah.
Can Craig grow rice? Probably not.
Yeah. We could ask him. We should ask him.
It's all about the community and environments. And then obviously the skills that you've worked on, if they kind of fit into that, So it's really interesting stuff. That's why I think a lot of your efforts, like talking back to like your outward efforts to better your life, it should be based on skill development, should be based on cultivating knowledge and skill, because all things are possible when you have the requisite knowledge and skill. All things that are physically possible are possible if you have the necessary knowledge and skill. You and I could build a skyscraper. All we lack is basically just the skill on how to do it. If we actually
wanted
got
to
the
do
resources together
Yeah.
and learned what to do, we could learn. You know, you can learn basically anything.
Yeah, that applies to it applies to everything. It's
Yeah.
when you see the way in one thing, you can see it in all things, right? And that's where getting good at something like jiu-jitsu allows you to apply those concepts broader
Yes.
in life.
Yes.
In terms of how do you develop skill, how do you break down concepts,
For sure.
how do you understand things, and then applying that in those perspectives. So let's wind it back a little bit then, and I want to talk about what your childhood was like,
Okay.
and go through what life was like as you were growing up to get you to this point here today.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was born in Camperdown Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
My family had an Indian restaurant in Newtown.
In Newtown.
My pop, a very interesting guy, same guy, the temple president. He was a
Like you
sailor.
got two dads. Same guy.
He
No, he's the
was
same guy, yeah.
he was a sailor. He sailed to 80 different countries.
Wow.
I don't even think he can swim, but he sailed to 80 different countries. He sailed to 80 different countries. He sailed in the Suez Canal. He went through that all the freaking time. He had like cannons mounted on the ship.
Yep.
Because during the Iran-Iraq war, he was delivering stuff to one of those two. I don't know which one. And some of the ships in his like convoy would even get bombed.
Oh wow.
So this guy lived a crazy life in a crazy time, you know. He was not even the eldest of 7 brothers.
Yep.
Obviously pretty poor Indian family. And just eventually luckily got off the ship at Australia, which was a good move, and he brought like 100 family members now we have in Australia.
Oh wow. So they were all with him on the boat at the same time?
No. So the
okay.
boat, he was just doing his own thing. He was like, I think, had a really shit job on the boat, and he wouldn't eat beef, so he wouldn't eat any meat. He would just live off like chips and fucking it's amazing to me. Like he's like 76 or something right now. He still works like 12-hour days, and he has no need to. Like the man's he's got tens of millions of dollars. He's very successful, but he still works like a madman.
Well,
because it's not even about the result for him.
Yeah.
He works for the sake of working.
Yeah. It's the routine.
It's a routine. He still, and even amongst, it just goes to show too, like how we're getting weaker and weaker. Like him compared to like my dad and their generation, compared to like me, we've lost that. I'm like I'm the whitest brown person you'll ever fucking. You know what I mean? I would gladly take Centrelink if I could get on Centrelink. I would gladly be on Centrelink. You know?
Shout out Australian government.
Please hook me up. You know, I don't want to do anything. In Punjabi we have an expression of like, he's so lazy he doesn't even want to snap a toothpick. That's how lazy. I don't want to do shit. You know, but this guy is just he's just a workhorse. And it's just, I guess, a sense of duty, you know? Like, that's just what he feels like he should be doing. And I guess it's also like the moving goalpost where with success, you get to a certain level. Like, my dad used to think, if I made 100,000 rupees, which is like $2,000 today, so back in the day, it'd be probably, I don't know, less. He was like, yeah, when I get 100,000 rupees, I'm going to go back to India. And he made 100,000 rupees, and then, he went from being a factory worker to other factories that were less, milk factory, whatever. Then he got his citizenship, and then he taxi driver for 10 years. If I just get my own business, then he gets his own business. Then he's got many businesses and this, that. You just, once you're on it, Like
yeah.
I wanted to just make it to class once a week doing MMA or whatever. And then I got into Jiu Jitsu, and then I wanted a blue belt. And then you want a purple belt. Then you want to do this, and you want to track down Lachlan Giles and go to Texas. And it's like, what the fuck? How did this all happen? You just kind of keep moving those goalposts. Yeah.
I think that's an interesting perspective because, Josh Saunders' perspective, like he's already got these really big line goals, and he's sees this really big picture.
Yeah.
Whereas I think your viewpoint and your progression is probably more the norm. Like I talk to, as an example, one of my mates is Tim Fung, who's the CEO of Airtasker. And when they started that, like it was literally just an idea between him and some of my high school mates. To just,
you should have got in on that.
I was doing my own thing. So
yeah.
But like anyway, so they it came as just an idea when they were moving out of somebody's apartment,
Wow.
helping to move each other's stuff out
That's
of someone's
amazing.
apartment, right? And then over the time, it just sort of grew and it grew and it grew to this point where, you know, he's now taken a company to IPO.
I would have been one of the guys telling him this is never going to work.
Right?
This is a shit idea.
But this is the thing, like, it's very easy to look back on and then go, oh, you know, what a great idea to take this company from nothing and then, you know, see this future that you could potentially take something to IPO. But it didn't happen like, you know, that they started and go, we're going to take this company to IPO.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, we're starting this thing. What's the first thing we need to do? Okay, we're going to do this. And then you sort of establish a bit of a baseline. And it's like, okay, what's the next goal that we need to attain here? And then the next goal and the next goal until they become such a big thing, right? So I think, you know, that's probably the more natural progression for people of getting into something, first of all. It's like you do something because there's some kind of positive validation it gives you or you're interested in it.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, this is something that I could pursue.
Well, a bit of fast forwarding. We left Newtown. We went to Minchinbury. From Minchinbury, pretty soon we moved to Hobartville, not too far from here, near Richmond.
Yep.
Nice, beautiful little area. You know, I wore a turban. My dad wore a turban. It was an all-white community, and we were totally loved. And there was no weirdness or... Like, I had an awesome time, from what I remember. I had awesome friends. We all hung out together. There was no weirdness or bullshit, you know. From then on, spent a couple of years at Beaumont Hills, like Kellyville area.
Yep.
And then most of
You
my...
grew up where I grew up. I grew up in
Really?
Balkan Hills, yeah.
Well, I was only there 6 months.
Okay.
'Cause pretty soon we moved to the Central Coast.
Yeah.
It was like a bit of a downtown where my dad, a lot of things went poorly for him business-wise. He lost a lot of money.
Okay.
So we had to like go from like a really nice house to like a little townhouse in the Central Coast. But that ended up being an amazing decision for him, financially, as well as, you know, really I enjoyed growing up on the coast. I had a good, you know, 12 onwards from year 7 to year 12. I went to Gorican High, and overall things were good. I wasn't very happy in terms of just because I just didn't know how to be happy. There was no reason for me to be unhappy. I'm not saying I was like sad or like depressed, but I just like, you know, just when you're young, you're a bit of a fucking idiot. I would always take things for granted. I don't have like my current mindset, which is like just super grateful for all the little things and just always coming back to being grateful and laughing and joking and stuff. You know, I've always wanted to be very well liked, you know, so I wanted to kind of do well at school, and I was kind of like struggling because I was like kind of religious, very religious, and then, you know, I wasn't hitting the kind of the social, you know, like obviously I'm not going to be very attractive to, you know, chicks and that. I'm running around wearing a big turban, you know, super Indian and stuff, and a lot of the more normal kind of markers for success, and I was terrible. I didn't do any sport. Yeah. I didn't have an athletic fucking bone in my body. I didn't do shit. I was okay at like learning and stuff. Yeah. And then I saw a fight in high school, and it was 2 football players, and they were not skilled fighters, but they were very athletic, and they were wailing punches at each other. And I quickly put it together that if I was ever in that situation, I was fucked. If someone started swinging at me, I wouldn't know what to do, you know? Yeah. And then there was an incident where someone they removed my turban. And that was very traumatic for me at the time, you know, because you forcibly remove someone's turban is one of the greatest insults. Yeah. And I really we have a big, like, a vengeance culture, and I wanted to like.
So what happened? Did you try and punch on him?
I was like year 9. He was year 12, and I was very weak and just very scared of him. I didn't do anything about it. I think they suspended him for a little while. But it dawned on me that sorry, just to pause there. So after that incident, did the bullying continue? No. Okay. It was an isolated incident. In general, like I said, a pretty pleasant time. The school acted on it immediately. Yeah. It was sorted, and the kid, I don't think he really realized. I think he wasn't a very bright kid. He might have even had some learning issues.
Bobby's trying to justify it. Yeah, the guy was autistic.
Well, it's like, you know what I mean. Like it's not. He's a fucking 17, 18-year-old idiot. Yeah, he's not some crazy racist doing a hate crime. You know what I mean? Like We're fucking kids. We're mucking around. But for me, I'm just crying and livid. And at the time, I want to fucking cut his head off. You know?
Yeah.
That's the story that I was told.
Yeah, you're ready to go to war.
Fucking, when these whites play up, you pull the scimitar out. No, I'm kidding. So I just felt, I'm like, I should learn self-defense. Like, it just makes sense to learn self-defense. I've done a little bit of karate. I YouTubed top 10 deadliest martial arts. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was like 7. And number 1 was ninjutsu. So I rang up a ninjutsu school in Gosford. And maybe the luckiest thing that ever happened to me was they didn't take anybody under the age of 16. And I was 14.
Yep.
And that might have been the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. Because thank God I didn't start doing ninjutsu. And on my bus ride to school, there was like a large banner. And the banner said cage fighting, mixed martial arts. And I'm like, I'll do this pussy MMA shit. So I'll learn something until I'm ready for ninjutsu. That was my plan. Do a couple of years of MMA, whatever. Then get into the hardcore ninjutsu, throwing
ninja stars,
shurikens and shit.
Yeah.
And then that brought me into like what real martial arts are like. And these guys were like sparring, having amateur and pro mixed martial arts fights. And then I learned like a lot of that, we would just do a lot of pad work and like cardio stuff. And I was like, oh my God, like conditioning, getting like, I was so out of my depth. I remember there was a chick laughing at me when I tried to hit pads. Like it was just, I remember the guy told membership options to my mum. He was like, oh, you can do once a week or it's cheaper if you go many times a week. I'm like, many times a week?
Yeah.
Like I couldn't even fathom doing this multiple times a week, you know?
Wow.
Just so out of my depths. And like I'm wearing a turban when I'm going through this workout. Like it's just so fucking just,
difficult.
It's so difficult. And what ended up happening was I stuck to just doing it once a week. Every Monday, I would go to MMA.
Yep.
And I wouldn't try very hard. I would try to do as little as possible. So if I had to exert myself, I would always keep a little, and I would just, just to kind of, I guess, maybe say I do MMA or something. I don't know what my motivation was too much. And one day what happened was the instructor, I think he had a karate background or something, Matt Travers, Kyoshi MMA. He goes, all right, come down. He goes, lie on the floor to one bloke. He kind of leans over him in kind of like a long base side control. And he shows us, I want to say an Americana. And my just brain exploded.
Yeah.
I was like, you mean I don't have to throw 30 punches and do 10 sprawls and fucking, like be gassed out? Like, this is the way of fighting? Like, this is the fucking
just lie on the other guy.
Yeah, I was like, just lie on top of the guy. This is awesome. So I was like, and I was also just impressed by how easily you could hurt someone so badly. Like, just by learning these minute, rolling the wrist forward, bringing the elbow in, now I can destroy someone's shoulder. Like, that was like sick. Like, okay. I was like, that's a cool trick. I'm just going to learn all these little tricks. Not long thereafter, Chris Bowles, who was an Elvis Sinisik student, he started teaching gi at that MMA school. So I started doing gi. Chris opened up his own, basically, jiu-jitsu only school, which was mostly gi. So I did about 2 years of gi. And then I got my blue belt at around 18. So I did a little bit of MMA, a little bit of gi jiu-jitsu. I was shocking at all of those things. I was terrible at it, Sucked at the gi, sucked at MMA. It's terrible. I'm still terrible at MMA. I can't throw a punch to save my life. And then 18, I'm 18 and I'm kind of like getting coerced into going to uni, and I don't really know what I want to do with my life. I started listening to a lot of Rogan.
Yep. Were you academic in school?
I just fell away. I was up until a certain age, but then in my later years, I was just doing lots of jiu-jitsu. I would drive down to Sinisik.
Yep.
So a 2-hour drive. I would do that most days. Quickly, I started doing jiu-jitsu every day. Kind of took over my life. And I didn't have room for much else. There was not much else I enjoyed. And I wasn't training very smart. I would just try to make it to as many classes as possible. I realized guys who were training once a week, if I trained twice a week, so I'd beat them.
Yeah.
Guys who were training twice a week, if I trained 4 times, I just would double what everyone else was training.
Yeah, outwork them.
And then I would beat them.
Yep.
Guys who were training every day, I would train twice a day. I would go to Sydney.
Yep.
So it's just about quantity of training, which isn't, now it's definitely not my, now I have a lot of kind of more sophisticated ideas around.
Yep.
Yeah. I got forced into like doing a business, starting a business degree by my parents, and then I took up some security work. So on the weekends, I was like,
you were a security guard.
I was 18. I was 65 kegs. I'm like 75 now. I was even 10 kegs lighter.
I suppose you got height. That's the only thing.
Oh, I looked comical.
Yeah.
I would like wear extra layers to like puff up and look intimidating. I did not intimidate anyone. I looked very funny.
Did you get into any trouble?
I would strangle the fuck out of people. I had a point to prove. I was insecure as fuck. I was the last guy. I had everything to prove, you know? And it was all I thought about and all I cared about. So I was like, I could fucking just strangle most drunk idiots. I just started thinking about training full time. Some time ago, I'd like read. I picked up a magazine when Craig Jones was a pub boy. He'd won worlds. There was an article on him, and I was learning about people who were just training full time, and I kind of had still some MMA fantasies that I would go to Canada, go to TriStar or something. I just wanted to train. That's all I cared about. I just wanted to train.
Did you want to fight MMA?
Sure. At that time, I think so. Yeah, you know, at that time, I definitely wanted to fight MMA. Fuck, I was retarded.
Well, like, I guess, and there's a lot of people have this attraction to it until they realize how difficult it is.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think a lot of people, they start and then they go, yeah, I'd love to have a fight. Yeah. And then they start the training. And then depending on the gym, like there are certain gyms which are quite structured in how they try and prepare you, and they might send you in to do some boxing first and some kickboxing, then a Jiu Jitsu comp. And so there are gyms that are like that have a very structured approach, which I think in today's world, it's probably not a bad thing, because the quality of MMA, people that go into MMA, is actually quite high in Australia. But there's other gyms where it's like you're going to get your rounds in the gym. Yep. And it's like the old boxing meathead mentality where it's like you're going to get your rounds in the gym. Yeah. Right? And like you get broken apart, and some people, they give up at that point. Some people find camp to be really, really difficult, especially when they're doing the hard sparring rounds and you're getting the shit kicked out of you. It does take a special person to want to pursue it, because reality is, like, even trying to make bank from fighting, it's not an easy way to make a living.
I had a guy who was like a coach and mentor, Tory Burdett. He's passed away now. He was someone I really respected. He said to me, "You're never gonna be good at MMA." And it hurt at the time, but he was absolutely right. He's like, "You're not built for this." But he said to me, "You could maybe even be a Jiu-Jitsu world champion." Yep. And I was like, okay, well, most people, everyone's telling me, Bobby, you're not doing MMA. Most teachers at school tell me, you're not going to do, people who didn't know anything about MMA looked at me like, you're not going to do MMA. But Jiu-Jitsu was kind of like, I'm like, this is really like, kind of like intellect overcoming, just sheer physicality in many ways. And there was also, I enjoyed it over wrestling and striking. I really enjoyed it over those two. Like I would often be in a striking class, just be looking at the clock, like, when's this over? So that's what I did at school and working in the shop. My parents had a convenience shop. So the only time I basically was just kind of in the moment was when I was doing jiu-jitsu. So I saw Craig have a pretty amazing performance at ADCC. Yep. 2017.
2017, yeah, breakout year.
He submitted low. He took out Murillo Santana. He tapped Chael Sonnen. This guy was doing really cool things. And he was in Melbourne. I'm like, fuck, Melbourne isn't that far away. Like, I could go to Melbourne, And that's a guy training here, beating the best in the world. So I'm like, maybe I could train in Australia, beat the best guys in the world, Before that, because no one had done it, it was kind of inconceivable. But now I was like, he's an Australian, I'm an Australian. Obviously, we're very different, in many ways. But of course, then I saw it, I was like, fuck it, we're going to go do that. I'm going to go to Melbourne. I'm going to live in Melbourne. Yep. I'm going to train with these guys. Because who better to tell me how to do it than the guy who's done it? Yep. So that's what I did. I went there, I lived there for 2 years. Got a purple belt under Lachlan Giles. Didn't really interact too much with Craig back then. I would just act really weird around him. Really, I would.
You
if
little
I
man
ever-
had a man crush.
Yeah, I remember one time we were in class. Lockie was teaching, and I'm kind of like at the outer edges, watching techniques. I'd never pay attention. Guys, if you're doing jiu-jitsu, when the technique period is on, your mission is to pay attention to all the details as well as possible to be able to replicate them, because it really matters. Like otherwise, you're not going to get good at jiu-jitsu unless you're a freak, instinctively great athlete. You know, you need to get the details down. But for years, I just freaking like, when are we going to start rolling? And that's terrible attitude. I remember I turned to my right. I kind of noticed Craig was standing next to me, and I was like, "This is my say something to him." And anytime that shit starts happening, you're not going to say anything good. You know, when you talk,
what did you say?
Like,
Yeah.
I'm talking to you now. I'm not jigging myself
You're not
up.
think, yeah.
And I just turned to him and I start looking at him. So then he starts looking at me, and I'm like, now I have to say something, because otherwise I'm just looking at him and I walk away. That's very odd. So I like blurted out. I'm like, "Did you know I can deadlift 100 kilos?" And he's like, "Oh, cool, bro." And he kind of walks away. I'm like, "No, not the right thing. I fucked it up."
Mad story.
Oh my god. So I was just, and pretty soon after that, you know, Isaac came through, who was the complete opposite of me in terms of just bucket loads of athleticism and talent. And we became very close friends. We're still, you know, good friends. Yeah, so it was interesting just being around very high level guys, Lachlan Giles, a lot of the black belts there. I went from like, you know, training with a purple belt on the Central Coast to being around a lot of very high level guys with the express purpose of getting better at jiu-jitsu. I would still work security. I was considering joining the cops.
Okay.
Yeah, I had
That's
that.
random.
Yeah, well, I was like, if I'm gonna work any job, the only like career option I was interested in was either police or military.
Okay. How do you think your parents would have taken that?
my poor parents, man, the things I've put them through, like they just wanted me to be a normal Indian kid. You know,
Have you got siblings?
I've got a younger sister.
Okay. And is she a normal Indian kid?
She's she's incredibly bright, excellent marks. She works for JP Morgan Chase.
Yeah, okay.
It took her when she was 19. She's making super well educated, making bucket loads of money, you know.
Yep.
That's what they wanted. And I'm off like,
Well, she had to compensate for you.
she had, yeah.
That's why she's the high achiever.
Yeah. So I just did that. And I was even more miserable. See, I was doing what I loved with the best people in the country, and I was miserable just because I couldn't manage my mind and emotions. And, you know, I would just focus on how I suck and how I'm not getting good, as opposed to, like, taking action, trying to work out what I could do to fix my situation. I would just kind of dwell on those things, and then, you know, I ended up breaking fucking up my leg, and then I moved back to my parents, dealing with the whole staph knee operation thing. As soon as I moved back to Melbourne, the first wave of the lockdown started beginning. So now I'm back where I started.
Yep.
I thought I was going to Melbourne. I was breaking out. I was doing all these cool things. You know, now I'm back in that same town.
Yep.
Running into a lot of my buddies who've been on fucking meth the whole time. You know? I had mates who were just I had fucking friends who got on meth and shit. And
Oh, wow.
so I felt good being around those people, because I'm like, at least I'm not on meth. You know?
I'm a couple of rungs up.
I'm doing better than Braden. No, that's not his name. I won't name my meth head friends.
No, don't do that.
But they're cool. I've had some of the funniest people. They're great for material. I wasn't doing comedy back then, but some of the best stories I have is of people I knew who were doing meth and having very adventurous lives, and I would turn it into bits. But yes, I was back home, and I was like, whoa, I really didn't even make the best of that opportunity. I didn't know anything about recovery, sleep, good diet. I just thought you just live and die on the mats, and it's like you got to live a life to facilitate great training.
Well, there's sacrifices that are going to be made elsewhere.
It's
priorities.
On top of that, I'm young, you know, I've got all these friends and I want to have fun. I want to do so. I'm still in that process. I've got nothing figured out. Like, I'm in no position to tell anyone how to live my life. My own life is in friggin' shambles, you know? But I kind of came back here, and that's kind of when I first started to train at Sydney West, because Isaac Michelle got offered a teaching position here by Luke.
Mm-hmm.
So Isaac said to me, this is good, you can clip this. Isaac said to me, Bobby, you can't run back to your parents every time there's a little problem in your life.
Mm.
And I'm like, brother, there's a global pandemic. I'm going back to my parents. And sure enough, 1 month later, he moves back to his parents in Adelaide. And I called him and I'm like, you can't run back to your parents. Anytime there's a little problem in your, it's hilarious. So he was living out in Adelaide. He was working a crazy job. He was like cleaning trucks.
Oh, wow.
Like till like, it started at like midnight. He's like, didn't sleep, trained during the day. He was working a crazy schedule. He ended up crashing his car just because he was so tired. Like he just dozed off at the wheel one time, and luckily it was at the lights. He just kind of rear-ended a guy. And he decided to come to Sydney, and I was like, look, I was struggling in Melbourne anyway. I wasn't eating the best, whatever. Let me just, at least Sydney, I'm living with my parents. Like my parents can cook for me and stuff. Like food's a big part. I'm lazy, And I'll have a high-level guy in Isaac to be around and learn from, because he's, obviously very good. And Luke, at that time, that's when I started training. So I did 6 months with Luke, and I made some of the most rapid improvement I had. And that's pre-trials, pre-supper, pre-baby Dave. We're talking like when Melbourne was locked down and we weren't. Kind of that phase. And also another thing to note is, at 19 years old, whilst in Melbourne, I started stand-up comedy just as a result of listening to a lot of comedy podcasts, knowing that there was a huge scene. Like at the time I started, it was the Melbourne Comedy Festival. There was a lot of opportunities to get stage time. Yep. So I'd kind of started doing, again, same as MMA, doing it once a week, whatever, not very serious, just trying to get stage time, get more comfortable on stage. So I kind of started basing my movements more around Sydney, doing a bit of comedy in Sydney, just, open mics, nothing special. And did about 6 months with Luke and made some pretty good progress, and then bang, back into another wave of lockdowns and more rubbish. So by then, I kind of ended up getting a purple belt, and I just didn't have much direction the whole time. During that time, Isaac, even when I was living in Melbourne, he started going to Henzo's, New York. He started to get really good. Yep. And he was, training with John, Gary Gordon, Craig, all the guys over there. And at the time, that seemed completely out of reach for me. I was like, how am I going to do that? It's not something I'm ever going to be able to do. And then there were some issues here where I started to realize, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to the States. I started thinking like that, and I started looking into how I would do that, go to America. And at the time, it was like, there weren't even any flights going on. It was like full COVID shutdown type time. But I knew Josh Alsop, who trained here. He was going to California, I think, and training with the Mendez brothers. Yep. So he was a guy I was talking to, and some people I was talking to. I was talking to Isaac, and Isaac ended up winning Brown Belt Worlds eventually. Now I'm kind of skipping a lot of time and really rapidly moving through things. And I kind of messaged Craig, even though I didn't really know him. But he, to his credit, even though we didn't have much of a relation, anytime I ever reached out to him, he always replied to me and kind of gave me time of day. And I said, I'm very far away from being at an elite level. Obviously, it makes a lot of sense for Isaac to be over there training because he's already
tip of the spear.
He's tip of the spear. But maybe I should stay here and continue developing. Like, does it make sense for me at my very low level to come? And he said, look, this is a hard choice to make, but all I can tell you is if you come here, you will get very good training. So I basically, I mean, that's kind of the year I got into very heavy meditation practice. And I was doing a lot of retreats and stuff, and I was at a retreat when, they take your phone away, the 10-day duration or whatever. And the 10th day when I got my phone back, I saw the trials had been announced, and they were announced in Australia for like the first time in forever. Yep. And I thought, man, this is 3 months' time. Let me just try to live completely in service of this one goal of trying to win this tournament. Let me fly to Austin and just dedicate myself with the best guys in the world again. Who better to show me how to win trials than, there's like, how many people have won trials there? Nicky Rod, Ethan Crelinson, Nicky Ryan. I think Ethan Crelison's won it twice. Jay Rod's won it. Like, they win trials like it's a fucking naga,
Yeah.
It's no biggie for them. So next thing you know, I'm in freaking Austin, Texas, of all places. Me and Isaac kind of looking at each other and we're laughing. We're like, man, like, the places we've been together, Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, and now fucking Texas.
Yeah.
Like, what a crazy journey it's been. And then I wasn't as, I was also kind of, I spent 6 months over there, came back, did the trials, and I lost second round to Burak Salman. And that was kind of the ending of that. And I was a bit, I didn't think I was going to win anyway.
Why is that? Like, why did you have this doubt in the back of your mind?
I have a lot of doubt in general. But I think it's more about, like, let's say if I've got a school test and I think I'm going to
just
100%
tilt your mic down a bit. Sorry.
turn it down or look.
Tilt.
Sorry, yeah. If I think if I've got an exam and I'm certain I'm going to fail, but I study 10 hours a day, I hire a tutor, I go to all my classes, I know all my stuff really well, does it matter what I believe? I'm still going to do well in the test. So that was more my mindset then.
Okay.
Just do, even if you don't believe, just do what someone who believed would do. And I had a lot of great examples of people to follow, of like kind of what to do. Even though I wasn't necessarily doing all the things I could be doing, That's a whole different topic. I came back here and I just still feel, I basically almost went the distance against, a 4 gold Pampax champion. So I had a competitive match where I was getting in on his legs and in a lot of very good positions against a guy who's like one of the best black belts in the country. So I had that to kind of hang my hat on. So I was like, I didn't feel too bad coming out of trial. Obviously, I want to win. Everyone wants to win, but I was pretty happy with that. And Craig's not someone who like bashes you and be like, oh, you suck, or he's not negative like that. He was like, yeah, good job. He'd promised me a brown belt if I'd only beaten Burak. So I was very close. I was very close to it. It would have been fun. So trials was over. And then what I didn't anticipate was to go on this crazy like teaching kind of tour. Where after trials was like July of last year, I ended up teaching at over 20 different schools.
Wow. And
doing a bunch of seminars and getting a financial return from Jiu Jitsu. And doing all this travel, Brisbane, Melbourne, and teaching privates. And so even though I didn't win trials, which was my preferred outcome, I had this other outcome, which was I had all of a sudden all this teaching opportunity and getting to share this stuff. And I realized, I'm like, I love this as much as competing. I almost enjoy it more than competing. It's much easier than competing and training and whatnot. So I was like, wow, it kind of opened my eyes up to that more. And now I'm like a week and a bit away from being back in Austin for potentially another 6 months to have another shot at, trying to be freaking world class at this ground grappling thing.
So then, from your parents' perspective, have they come around? And
I think especially very recently, now that I am kind of getting paid, even though it's I'm not getting paid, I'm not making great money, but now it could potentially in the next few years become something I can live off. I think I'm not too far away from just living off jiu-jitsu, which is that's wild. That's like my wildest dreams. Like as a purple belt now, to think I'm not far off. Just off of coaching, being able to live off jiu-jitsu, potentially doing some online stuff and potentially just traveling, teaching, doing seminars. Like that is, I wouldn't have ever thought that by purple belt. I thought you have to be a freaking, a world champion or something just to be able to live it. But you can kind of create these opportunities. Like depending on if you're a bit lucky and a bit savvy, with social media and stuff,
Yeah,
you're
of course.
posting regularly.
Yeah, dissemination of information,
Yeah.
getting people to buy into who you are,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. And it just it's saying you're creating value for people.
Yeah.
Like most people can't go to Texas and spend a year at B team.
Yep.
But I could do that, and that might be incredibly hard for me to do. But then having done that, I've got knowledge and skill that I can share with others back here.
Yeah.
So that kind of all those years of traveling and going here, going there, going to seminars, going to workshops, going to tournaments, I was kind of investing in myself, not knowing if there was possibility of a return, but now I see there is. And it kind of now it feels like a lot of people, some people are like, oh, this freaking blue belt teaching seminars, just overnight. Who is he? Where's he come from? It's like, man, I've been doing this for like 8 years. Not only like 8 years and then something happened. Doing it 8 years, assuming nothing will come of it. Basically, it's not like you do a medical degree and then you do your residency, whatever, and then at least at the end of this, I'm gonna get a decent job. Like, you could do jiu-jitsu for decades. You could do it very seriously. I did jiu-jitsu most of the time pretty seriously, and nothing happens. Your leg breaks. No one cares. That's the other thing. I could name many grapplers who are much better than I, but they have to work labor jobs.
Yep.
Tito Kale is a way better grappler than I am. Probably has more knowledge and stuff than I am, But for whatever reason, he's I don't know if I should have named him, but
It's one of those things though, like when it comes to teaching, not everybody who's good at the sport can necessarily teach as well.
Yeah.
So there's a real thing about being able to articulate, the right strategies, the right concepts. Liam from VT1, when we did a podcast, we're talking about this idea about how when it comes to coaching, there are, like, every gym has a slightly different flavor. And one of the things that I'm very fortunate enough to do with my podcast is that I can get around to other places and train here and there and experience, different rooms.
Yeah.
And, like for me, like I train, like kickboxing, MMA and jiu-jitsu. So from that perspective, like I like that adaptability about, I can go and visit this place and get kickboxing work in or MMA work in, blah, 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 blah. But, every gym has a slightly different flavor, and that does start from the top. It starts with who's instructing, and what is the sort of expectations that they set, and what is the vision for what they have.
Yeah,
and that even applies to every martial arts school, right? Like when you go to, if you were to go and learn karate, I did karate as a kid.
Yeah,
what is the purpose of that school? That particular karate school that I was learning at was very focused on more like the self-defense aspect, not the competitive karate aspect. So it wasn't really like the point fighting and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
When I was really into Kung Fu, like when I first started there, and this was one of the interesting things, was that when I first started there, it was about, like how do you defend yourself and blah, 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 blah. But then I feel like over the years, the nature of the training actually changed. And it was one of those things where it's like I sort of outgrew it because the focus shifted more to like a health and culture aspect,
right,
as opposed to practical application aspect.
Yes.
And for me, I wanted the practical application aspect.
Yes.
So then that led me to then go and explore other things.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, that's what anybody who wants to get involved in any martial arts thing, or even if you're getting into comedy as an example, right?
Yeah.
Like you need to make sure that, well, what are your goals first of all? So do your goals align with the place where you're getting the work in?
Yep.
Because if they don't align from that perspective, it's never going to be a long-term relationship anyway.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And yes, like sometimes, like a place, if you train at a certain place, but then their goals don't align with yours anymore. So as an example, it might be a jiu-jitsu school that's more geared around the hobbyist, right? So, for everyday Joe Blogs who's working a 9-to-5 job, wants to get in his work, 3 times a week, that school's going to be great for him.
Yes.
Right? But then if you're, you're Bobby Sandhu and you want to be competitive on the world stage,
yep,
and you want to make sure that, you're getting the latest in terms of development, skill development, you want to understand what the latest meta is, so to speak, before it was leg locks and then now it's becoming leg locks to the back, and then, you know, we're going to see that come full cycle again, and it's going to be back to mount and mount to the next thing, et cetera, et cetera. You know, you need to find rooms that resonate with your goals.
Absolutely.
Right?
Communities and environments comes back to that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, I lost my point in terms of why I started talking about this, but yeah, like I think that's one of the things. Oh yeah. So when I was talking with Liam, you know, he was saying like, you know, every gym's got a slightly different skill set in terms of what can they offer you. You know, there are gyms, so just speaking about the MMA side of things, there are gyms that are good at taking people with no experience and getting them to amateur level competition, right? Then there are gyms that are great at taking those amateur level competitors and potentially getting them to the pro stage.
Wow.
Right? But then there are also gyms that are just, all their team is just all pros.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes, like you might need to go to one of those teams to get working with just the pros.
For sure.
Right? So it really just depends on what your goals are and how that sort of resonates. So from that perspective, you know, how you articulate concepts and ideas and techniques is going to be very different. Like there might be somebody who's very good at the sport.
Yes.
Right? Yep. But can they actually break it down and explain things? So it's the same
little things, you know, even just being personable.
Yeah.
Like having done a lot of comedy at this point, many years of comedy, when I'm delivering, it's not a dry, just delivering, you know, a Danaher rendition. It's like, you know, it's like I'm going to change my pitch and tone and pause.
Yep.
And volume and, you know, and
project.
Bring your attention in and throw a joke in there, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's much easier to deliver a many-hour seminar when you can make it light and easy and make it entertaining.
Yep.
Because it's an experience.
Yeah.
Of course, the goal is skill development. But you can develop skill in a miserable way and you can develop skill in a very pleasant way. And I think having those people in a training room, having those people as instructors, just having good people skills, you know, that's like, I learned how to speak English in a convenience store. And I think that was very useful to me.
Well, you learn how to deal with all types of people.
You learn hundreds of people come through the door a day. You learn how to make small talk, just look people in the eye. It should be a pleasant thing to interact with other human beings. You should enjoy that. I really enjoy that. I enjoy talking to people, learning about people, meeting people. Wow, look at this whole other person.
Yep.
What's this guy up to? This guy, you know what I mean? This is another monkey like me running around doing.
Wow, in this 10-second interation. Look, Bobby, all I want to do is buy my pack of condoms and get the fuck out of here.
What are you going to do with these? Is she hot? Yeah, well, you can learn by asking people the right questions. I mean, I'll kind of bring it back to more in a seminar context, like all that stuff. It's even just people feel like they can approach you and ask you and talk to you and kind of share. Certain people, they just might not feel as approachable, you know? So
isn't it funny? Like, I think everybody has this this little bit of like, you feel like you got imposter syndrome, like why, you know, and I guess you sort of touched on it when you said, you know, you're delivering a seminar, Craig walks in, you feel like, oh, why am I delivering this seminar? But at the end of the day, like, it's also your take. Like, and I get this too, right? Because, you know, I commentate a lot of the local shows and then I'll do like fight analysis based on themes that I like to take away and apply my own training. And it's like, well, why would people listen to me over, you know, someone else?
Yeah.
Right? But at the same time, it's like, well, I've got a slightly different perspective perhaps.
Yeah.
Right? Because, you know, I'm a guy that's done, you know, karate and kung fu and all the, like, you know, Jiu Jitsu and kickboxing and MMA and blended sort of like different concepts from all of these different ways of articulating it. Like how somebody teaches something in karate when the stances are quite structured versus, you know, how it might be taught in other schools. Like the articulation is different. The vernacular, the words are different.
For sure.
Right?
And no doubt, like, I'm not delivering content anywhere near Craig's level, but good luck paying him 10 grand, you know?
Yeah.
Well, do that.
Good see if he'll accept.
Yes, see if, you know, and I'm around the guy. I'm learning from that guy, you know, potentially all year round. And I'm coming in, and it's a for sure a distilled form of that. And you're right, there is going to be kind of and this is the other thing. Even at I've had many high level coaches. Even within B team, you got Nicky Ryan, Ethan Crellenston, Nicky Rod, Craig, all these guys. In any field at the highest levels, there's not necessarily consensus. People have different opinions. Craig thinks if you're in a leg entanglement, he has one go at the heel. He's wrestling up. That's a very specific. Craig has a lot of very innovative, kind of unorthodox takes on things. So you can there isn't, at a certain point, there is no right or wrong.
Yep.
Early in your martial arts, you want to learn all the rules, heuristics, follow them, and then once you know them, you can break them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So at the highest levels, it's like Giles would say this. He's like, when someone asks me what should I do in this position, well, it depends what your game is.
Yep.
Rafa Mendez might do one thing, Marcelo might do one thing, Gary Turner might do. He might turn around and do a fucking forward roll or something nuts. Yep. So once you learn, obviously, there are options that are more high percentage. They're that way because it's the norm. Just if you're in a mount, you're probably going to kip, knee elbow escape, hip bump. Some things have been pretty worked out. Some positions are pretty. But yeah, it's interesting to get different takes. Yeah.
Let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk a little bit about the comedy.
Okay.
All right, because I'm sort of curious. So when you first got this idea that you wanted to do comedy,
I'm getting nervous thinking about it.
Well, what was the reason? Like, it was just like, I feel like I'm a funny guy, or did somebody tell you, or was there a catalyst?
So I would always tell people stories.
Yep. I
would often be addressing group of people, 8 people, and just had everyone's attention. They might not be laughing, but I had their attention. And even in school, I might tell a story, and then depending on the response I got telling it to different groups, I would modify the story. So I'd like basically work on material.
Yep.
People would say, "Oh, Bobby, you're telling the same story." I'm like, "No, it got better. Like, listen to this version."
Yeah.
So in a sense, I was doing comedy, but just didn't realize. I didn't think this was something you could do and get, because no one does. How many people do comedy? It's very rare. In saying that, there were very famous comedians whose material I would run into, and it would, like, there were certain Indian comics who did comedy in Punjabi, and then Russell Peters had this bit about hitting your kids. I'm forgetting the bit, but I remember, like, my abdomen in pain from laughter, like just being blown away by how incredible this guy was, and I listened to lots of Rogan. From Rogan, I kind of moved on. I was listening to heaps of Joey Diaz. Joey Diaz would often make comedy analogies that I would apply to my jiu-jitsu. I was 18, living in Melbourne, a bit miserable, and I would kind of I liked his motivation, get after it,
Yeah. So give me an example. What's a comedic,
Making good use of your time, are you just rocking up to your session, or are you working on specific things? Are you doing the same moves over and over again? Are you doing the same jokes over and over again? Are you changing premises? Are you changing punchlines? Are you adding tags? Like, what are you doing different? How are you making best use of your time? Are you actually rocking up? Are you rocking up consistently? It's like we said, the way broadly, skill development. I think having had it, even though I'm only, a handful of years into comedy, I think 4 years into comedy or something, having done 8 years of jiu-jitsu, it really lends itself to it, and you just also learn that getting good at hard shit takes patience. It's not going to happen overnight. You're going to suck for a really long time, and that's okay. And that's also not only okay, it's great, because it's kind of cool to look back and be a white belt and be nostalgic, and just the fact that I couldn't handle certain situations, I still remember my first time emceeing, and generally you're an open micer, you're some type of an act. You have 5, 10, whatever, how many minutes of material. But then oftentimes in many of these shows, when there's many comedians, there'll be an MC who's the host, does the introduction, brings each comic on. And hosting is a very different job. I'm actually hosting a gig on Tuesday at the Newcastle Comedy Club. If anybody is around in Newcastle, come watch me die on stage. And I remember it just came down to me not having the knowledge and skill. And I just came down like a ton of bricks. One of the most terrible experiences of my life. And I'm getting paid. And pay $150 to just do the worst job possible. It doesn't happen in any other thing. If you're a plumber, you go to fix a guy's toilet and you destroy it.
Yeah.
It's in fucking this block. The house is fucked. The guy's not gonna get pay you. But in comedy, you're gonna fuck everything up.
You bombed,
and you still get
getting
the
paid.
same amount of money. It's kind of funny. That's something I've brought up on stage before. I'm like I don't actually care if you guys laugh. Like you know, actually I really do care. But but I still get paid the same amount whether I do terribly. Yeah, and I had a whiteboard where I would plan my jiu-jitsu, and I put a little lowercase c in the top right-hand corner. C for comedy. And I was so embarrassed by the idea of doing comedy. I wouldn't even write like do comedy. I'm like, what is this? Like, it's such a left field thing. It's almost like, you know, something in me I want to get rid of. I'm like, what is this fucking this weird urge I have to fucking want to tell jokes. And over time I started, just by him drawing analogies all the time, I started learning, okay, there's this thing called doing open mics, and you get up and then you deliver, you talk, and you try to get people to laugh, and there's premises and setups. And I mean, I'm not really sure I had too much technical knowledge of comedy back then. But I was going to do a comedy course. There was like a school of hard knocks or something in Melbourne. But it was expensive, and it was the same time as jiu-jitsu. And I'm like, I'm not going to take time off jiu-jitsu.
To do this, yeah.
To fucking do this thing and pay $1,100 to fuck that. But I found a late night open mic that was next to Collingwood Absolute. It was called, it's still around. My friend runs it, Adam Ulatas. It's called Dirty Secrets Comedy.
Okay.
On not Cromwell Street. It's on Smith Street, next to a really good kebab joint. And they had like a late night open mic. And at the time, it was one of the only late night open mics. So I could go there after jiu-jitsu. Yeah. Because I had this day where there was a guy in, and I was telling these guys a story. And like often happened, they would like doubled over laughing at my story, you know, because I'm very expressive and I'm telling the story. And I kind of had this moment of clarity where I'm like, this happens pretty often. Pretty often I'm making people laugh. And I have no idea how to do this. It's just kind of naturally happening. What if I did an open mic a week for 10 years? What if I planted a seed and watered it for the next 10 years? What could it grow into? Yep. And that was kind of when I started to seriously consider the possibility of getting on a stage. Then I found that open mic, and I was like, I told my friends I was going to do this. I was going to get up, and they were going to come watch. And then kind of the time came to do it, and I started to really get cold feet about it. I remember I last minute called another friend, hoping that by the time I'd go pick him up, I would miss the sign-up period. Yeah. So when I picked him up, and then my other friend got there early and said, "Oh, Bobby, I can sign you up." So then I'm like, "Oh, still, I'm telling him, don't sign me up. I'll get there. I'll sign up myself." So I rock up with my friend Sam Kakemba, who's a pro, fights for Hex, one of the most talented young up-and-coming MMA fighters. Really inspired me, just in terms of character development and all that stuff. He's like an older brother to me, you know, a couple of years older than me. Incredibly positive influence in my life. He came with me, and there was my housemate Dane as well, you know, and we get there, and I just saw the empty chairs. It wasn't even anyone there yet. There was just a stage, a stool, you know, a little like a basement type setup, and there was like maybe 20 chairs down. And I'm like, there's gonna be people sitting in these chairs. I can't do this. So I just totally decided I'm not doing this, and was stern, like, I'm not doing this, guys. Even though I'd brought people there to watch it, you know. And they're like, and then Sam was like, okay, cool. He said, I'm going to do it. I was like, what? He's like, yeah. So he just went over and put his name down. Even though he had no idea
what he was going to say.
That he was even going to do comedy. Yeah. I just roped him into it to come watch me. And he was so disgusted with me now pulling out that he put his name down. And seeing him put his name down, I couldn't let him have that over me. Yeah. So then I put my name down. So he actually did comedy before I even did. So he went up, did his little set, and I went up, I did my little set.
Wait, was his set any good? Like, did he actually have something planned?
Look, you're not good in comedy for decades. Like, forget about good.
So basically, he bombed so that you could look good.
Well, it was like, relatively speaking, he's a confident guy who's done a lot of public speaking. And when you're a brand new guy and the MC says, okay, this next comic coming up, Johnny Sins. I don't know why I call it Johnny Sins. Johnny, it's his first time doing comedy. The crowd is very supportive and they want you to do well. Yeah. So they will give you lots of leeway. And there's ways you can manipulate crowds to be a lot easier on you. And then there's ways you can, as an MC, make it very hard for the comic.
Yeah.
If I say, oh, this next comic coming up, Bobby, he's been all around the world. He's done comedy in Texas. He's been on Kill Tony. And I build up a great expectation. Now you're going to have to really bring it.
Yeah.
Because they expect you to be good. And they're like, oh, yeah, I'll see how good. You know? So
Yeah.
it's the crowd. It was really interesting how you can manipulate the crowd and
Expectations.
work with the. It's a really fascinating thing. It's in some ways very simplistic. In another way, there's so many layers and variables to it. So it's a really interesting game to be involved in.
Mm.
And I just kind of kept up doing that same spot. An open mic setup is, it might be 20, 30 comics, and everyone just does 5 minutes, one after the other, one after the other. Sometimes there's not even an audience. Sometimes there's 2 people in the audience. I would do gigs where I'd get there at 8, and by the time it was my turn to get up, most of the audience had left because they're just sick of seeing terrible comedian after terrible comedian, And I get up and it's freaking, 1 a.m.
Yeah, wow.
And I remember there was a couple left. So I got up and there's 2 people in the audience. And as I go to start my routine, the guy gets up and goes for a bathroom break.
Yep.
So it's just me
And this lady.
and the sound guy,
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, there's literally more people running the comedy than watching the comedy. And I just kind of sat down, started talking. I'm like, I'm not even going to bother just to do a set
Really?
here. I just thought, it was funny.
Was she good about it?
Yeah. It was. I barely remember this, but I would go on from that to getting up at the Comics Lounge where there's 500 people in the audience, even though I only did a minute. But it was like I got on a stage and did comedy in front of 500 people. It's very little things odd, Then before long, I start doing many spots. Some nights I did 3 spots a night. I went to 3 different shows. Over time, I went to many different rooms. Did comedy in freaking Queensland, Brisbane, Gold Coast, Adelaide. Sydney, Newcastle. You just do what you can, as much as you can. You do what's available to you in the moment. If it's only, 2 people in the audience, okay, you do that.
Yeah.
If it's you do a comedy call, you do whatever you can. You think, okay, what's gonna make me better at this? Let me do it as however minor and inconsequential it might seem, to the point that when a few of my friends opened up a comedy club, I've got an in with them. Now this comedy club's doing sometimes 80, 90 people in a weekend.
Yeah, wow.
And there's consistent shows all the time. So now I've got access to that space. And, naturally, if you're with a bit of luck and consistency, things can just kind of get better and better and better. And, you become more confident and more capable, and those 2 things work hand in hand. Confidence and capability. Confidence, I think, stemming from capability. And then, you slowly start to build and learn, and it's amazing. It's one of my favorite things in the world to do well. It's when you kill, it's hard to say I've killed, when you're 4 years into anything. It's like when a white belt's like, oh, I destroyed a blue belt's like, I destroyed that guy. It's like, yeah, dude, there's there's levels. So, but I've had some pretty sick moments, where I was like, wow, and I remember being in Austin at the Vulcan, watching Rogan, Ron White, all these elite level comics, and just imagining, I'm like, fuck it, that's possible. Trying to put myself in that lens of I didn't think it was possible to be running around doing seminars and fighting black belts and doing that stuff, but if you keep trudging along and you focus on the process and you take it one step at a time, and you try to, it comes down to self-management, which is why I kind of like talking to Luke and being around Luke a lot, because he's quite good at self-management. I'm quite bad at it. If you can learn to manage yourself and manage your main resources, which is your mind and body, there's who can say what the end of your potential is? Who can say what your full potential is? So long as you're doing this with mindfulness. I think that's the key, because there's no point being miserable throughout the whole process and then getting to some momentary fleeting goal of, oh, now I've done it. And then it's like, yeah, you've done it, but the whole time you were miserable.
Mm.
Decades of being miserable. You could have been pretty content and still be doing it.
Yeah.
Which is what I'm aiming for. I want to be successful, but I don't want to be like miserable until I'm successful and holding my happiness, ransom until I've
until you reach that goal. Yeah, I think that's a very smart perspective to have, because sometimes it's actually the journey to get there that is the exciting part. Like once you and I guess this is one of the things Josh Saunders always talks about, is that the only differential that you have to worry about, the only variable is time, how long it takes you to get there. If you've got the actions in place for you to get to that end result.
Exactly.
Right?
If you're day to day doing everything you can.
Yep. Then the only differential is time, and so in time you'll get there.
That's very powerful.
And from that perspective, then why would you hang all your happiness on just this fleeting moment in time?
100%.
Right? You might as well enjoy the process the whole way through. Right? Soak it all in. Enjoy those moments, where it's you and one other lady in the audience versus one and you and 500 in the crowd, or whatever happens from that perspective. I think that's a very powerful outlook to have.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
No, I really
enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah. Thank you. So if people want to find you, obviously it's
so Instagram is where I'm most active. My handle is Bobby, BOBY Sandhu. That's Sand, HUBJJ. I've got a YouTube channel in the works. Should have a subscription group with Jiu Jitsu Ocean. I think it's Jiu Jitsu Ocean. No, Athletes Ocean. Sorry, not Jiu Jitsu Ocean. Should know my own subscription group where I'll be putting out techniques. I'm a little over a week until I'm back in the US. Hopefully the border agents let me in and I can do a good 6-month stint out there. So if you're interested in learning, the B team kind of style of jiu-jitsu, which is more wrestling up focused, more submission focused, hit me up. You can hit me up for seminars, privates, or join the subscription group. If you're interested in my comedy, you're an idiot and you'll regret it. But yeah, I'm often at the Newcastle Comedy Club when I'm around. I really recommend you guys come to the Friday, Saturday showcase shows. It's just a really great time. Pretty big capacity. There's a bar there, and you can hang around, meet the comics afterwards. It's Newcastle's only dedicated comedy space. There's a lot of open mic shows that run as well. But the Newcastle Comedy Club, I think it's rated higher than the Civic Theatre right now. So it's a really cool spot, and I really recommend. I think you'll have a great night, lots of laughs. So yeah, Newcastle Comedy Club, my Instagram. Give me money.
Yeah. So 6 months back in Texas, and then what's the plan after that? Coming back here, or?
So November, I think 25th is the Singapore trials.
Yep.
So I'll do 6 months in Austin, come back around July, August, September, October, November. I'll do another 3 months here at Sydney West.
Yep.
And just keep chasing the jiu-jitsu dream,
Yep.
Keep training, focusing on knowledge, skill development, athleticism. Yeah, doing a bit of comedy along the way. Trying to be happy.
Yep, and survive.
Doing it. I might get a bit of peyote off this guy. See if there is a God or not.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.